Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Let me, this session of the Dissertation Council for the Defense of Thesis by Fedorova and Aleksandrovna for the degree of Candidate of Sociological Sciences Specialization 220006, Sociology Culture, on the theme Ethnic and National Groups Representation in the Network Space of Russian Ethnicity. Declare open. According to the order of St. Petersburg University, number 1028/1, dated the 17th of February 2020, me, Miletsky Vladimir Petrovich, Professor of the Department of Sociology and of Political and Social Processes of St. Petersburg University, was appointed chairman of this Dissertation Council. In accordance with the order of St. Petersburg University from the 23rd of March 2020, number 2304/1, our meeting shall be held in the remote access mode to the members of the Dissertation Council present of the meeting, and let me introduce my fellow council members. Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology at St. Petersburg University, Ludmila Georgievna Pochubut. Doctor of Cultural Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Sociology, Culture and Communication at St. Petersburg University, Rumia Kamilina Tangalicheva. Thank you. Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Russian History of the 20th-21st centuries of the Southern Federal University, Galina Sergeyevna Denisova. Thank you, Galina Sergeyevna. Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor, Department of Sociology of Kherson, Russian State Pedagogical University, Elena Alexeyevna Okladnikova. Thank you, Elena Alexeyevna. Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor, Department of Sociology, North Caucasian Federal University, Marina Mikhailovna Shulga. Thank you, Marina Mikhailovna. Absent today is Doctor of Philosophy, academician of the National Academy of Sciences of Belarus, Evgeny Mikhailovich Babosov. He is absent for a good reason. And also the applicant is with us, Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorova. Anna Alexandrovna, can you hear me? Thank you. Well, all the members of the Dissertation Council we can all are connected. We can all see and hear each other. That is why let's start. Dear colleagues, since our meeting is held in the remote access mode, I would like to warn you that we may run into some issues of technical nature, and I'm kindly requesting to watch the procedure carefully in case you stop seeing or hearing someone, or in case of some technical failure. Please inform me, and I shall announce a technical break until these issues are eliminated. In case I suddenly you stop hearing me, the sound goes off before I manage to announce a technical break, I'm kindly asking Rumia Kamilina Tangalicheva do this and announce a technical break in case there is a technical failure, but hopefully that will not happen. Let me also inform you that our meeting is being recorded and broadcast online at the St. Petersburg University website. and the speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English. Next, the applicant's page currently displays an email address to which during our meeting anyone can send the questions to the applicant online, questions related to the thesis, current scientific discussion, presentation of the applicant. These questions shall be forwarded to me and I will read them out during our meeting, provided these questions are related to the presentation of the applicant, the contents of her thesis. Also, it's necessary for each sender to indicate his name, full name, position, place of work. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion or to the discussion of the thesis, the text or assessment of the thesis itself, shall not be presented. First, according to the federal law number 127 of the 23rd of August 1996 on science and the state scientific and technical policy, St. Petersburg University has the right to award academic degrees independently. According the corresponding order number 6821/1 of the 1st of September 2016 on procedure for awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University has been issued, and on the basis of this order we are holding this session of the Council. In accordance with this order, a session of the Dissertation Council is duly constituted if at least 2/3 of the approved members of the Council are present. Our Dissertation Council consists of 7 members. 6 members are present, all in the remote interactive mode. Audio-visual contact has been established to all of them, and with the applicant as well. Thus, there is the quorum, and we may start the defense procedure. I instruct the curator of our defense, Khrushchev, a research officer of the Dissertation Council's Activity Support Department, to draw up the attendance list in which the members present and the applicant shall be recorded and indicate a work mode, in this case remote. Let me also set forth the procedure of today's session with the should not exceed duration, should be approximately 2 hours. They shall include the following points. First, the chairman's summary report on the main content of documents submitted by the applicant, the degree and their compliance with the applicable requirements, answers to possible questions. Approximately 5 minutes. Second, brief presentation by the degree applicant outlining the key points of her research and results of her research. No more than 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly on her report from members of the Council, Dissertation Council, no more than 2 minutes per each question. 4. Answers of the applicant to the questions of each member of the Dissertation Council. No more than 5 minutes for all questions. 5. Speeches of all the members of the Dissertation Council with their reviews, stating their opinions, questions, and suggestions to the applicant. No more than 10 minutes for each speaker. 6. Speech of the chairman and his review, Academician Babosov, as absent from a meeting, up to 10 minutes. 7. Speech of the chairman and his review, up to 10 minutes. 8. Answers of the applicant to questions and comments of the members of the Dissertation Council. No more than 15 minutes for all the questions. 9. Open discussion. Speeches and questions to the applicant strictly on the topic. No more than 5 minutes for each question. Also reading out questions sent by email, if any. 9. 10. Final answers of the applicant to questions asked. No more than 5 minutes, if there will be any. 11. Reading by the chairman the review of the academic supervisor, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor Sikevich Zinaida Vasilyevna. 12. Discussion before the open voting on awarding or not awarding the academic degree of St. Petersburg University to the applicant. No more than 5 minutes. 13. Open individual voting and counting the votes. Chairman of the Council should count the votes and results shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. 14. Making the decision on awarding or not awarding the academic degree of St. Petersburg University to the applicant. And finally, closing remarks of the applicant. No more than 2 minutes. Here's our procedure, dear colleagues. And let me ask you, do you have any questions or objections to this procedure? There are no questions. If there are no questions or objections, let's start running the procedure. But before, let me remind you to switch off your mobile phones. Thank you for your understanding. Okay, let us start. Vladimir Petrovich, excuse me. Elena Alexeyevna is, she's with us. I beg your pardon. Okay, let me start running the meeting. First item is the chairman's summary or report on the documents submitted by the applicant to the dissertation department of our university. The thesis by Fedorova and Aleksandrovna for the degree of candidate of Sociological Sciences, specialization 220006, Sociology of Culture, on the theme Ethnic and National Groups, Representation in the Network Space of the Russian Ethnicity, was accepted for defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, dated on the 19th of February, 2020, number 1086/1. The Dissertation Council was also appointed by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University of the 17th of February this year, 1028/1. And I have already introduced its members to you. So let me proceed to the document submitted by the applicant. Fedorova Aleksandrovna wrote her thesis at the St. Petersburg University. Her academic supervisor was Doctor of Sociological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Cultural Anthropology and Ethnic Sociology of St. Petersburg University, Sienkiewicz Zinaida Vasilyevna. The number of publications of the applicant, which set out the main scientific results of the thesis according to the list presented. I have it here in front of me, is 5, including in peer-reviewed scientific journals from the list approved by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, 5, in journals indexed in the Web of Science and Scopus databases. They submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University a full package of documents for acceptance of defense for consideration of defense. All documents correspond to Section 3 of the all the documents submitted by the information are received. Requirements are available from the Office of the Council Department of today's session. Larissa Victor, who's online and well, the members, do they have any about the document just submitted by submitted to the Dissertation Support Department? If no one has
ученой степени Анне Александровне Федоровой. Анна Александровна, до 15 минут есть в вашем распоряжении. Пожалуйста, приступайте.
Спасибо большое. Включаю презентацию. Почему-то, прошу прощения,
15 minutes.
Секундочку.
Let me start.
Да, пошла.
Отлично, все видно должно быть. Глубоко уважаемый председатель, уважаемые члены диссертационного совета, вашему вниманию предлагается диссертация по теме «Сетевые репрезентации этнонациональных групп в виртуальном пространстве русской этничности». В первую очередь я бы хотела поблагодарить всех вас за присутствие на защите, которая проходит в столь непривычном для нас формате. Тема обсуждаемой диссертации предусматривает изучение коллективных представлений русских о национальности пользователей социальной сети ВКонтакте по отношению к собственной этнической группе и к значимым другим. Начать, наверное, следует с упоминания о поправках в Конституцию Российской Федерации, согласно которым могут быть внесены положения о признании русского языка государства образующим, о равноправии и самобытности всех культур и народов нашей страны, также о защите прав русских и поддержке соотечественников за рубежом. В условиях, когда на носителей русской культуры накладывается бремя ответственности за государственное единство с одной стороны, а с другой стороны провозглашается тезис о тотальном культурном равноправии, носители русской культуры все чаще задаются вопросом, что же такое быть русским в этих условиях, каковы общерусские ценности, взгляды, представления, каково же их место среди иных этнических групп и даже стран. Вместе с тем, проявления русской этничности нередко связываются в общественном сознании с этническим национализмом. Граница между одобряемым патриотизмом с одной стороны и неодобряемым этническим национализмом с другой стороны оказывается крайне эфемерной. В подобных условиях кооперация по признаку принадлежности к русскому этносу все чаще переходит на новую виртуальную почву, и уже в чуть более яркой форме продолжается поиск ответов на все те же известные вопросы, что такое быть русским и что значит быть другим. В свою очередь, теоретическая актуальность исследования обусловлена рядом причин, а именно, во-первых, это достаточно значительного количества работ по исследованию русской этничности, в том числе из-за потенциальных обвинений в национализме. И, во-вторых, принципиальными сложностями трактовки феномена виртуальной русской этничности
of virtual ethnicity.
Объявить технический перерыв пропало связь
We
у
call
переводчика.
technical break. Ну вот я вижу соискательницу, всех остальных. Звук не слышу.
Все наладилось, можно начинать.
Спасибо большое, Лариса.
Okay, thank you very much, Larissa Viktorovna.
Да, конечно.
Anna Alexandrovna, can you please continue? Please continue.
Надеюсь, видно презентацию.
Hopefully everyone can see my presentation. Yes.
Все вышесказанное.
Taking all this into account,
Начать исследовательскую
I try to designate my work to a research position that would allow me to look beyond the existing works, thus justifying the relevance and novelty of my own thesis. So the object of my research is virtual communities and social networks built on the principle of self-actualization of participants to the Russian ethnos. If you see the word Russian, name of the group contacting, most likely considered within the framework of creating a sample. National communities then created by the participants of groups in the process of interaction in the virtual space of Russian ethnicity. The purpose is actually consolidated on its basis. Thus, the main question divide the virtual space of Russian groups into theirs and others. So to achieve this,
модификация зарубежных концепций виртуального национализма, применительных к русским национальным и националистическим сообществам.
nationalization as applied to Russian national groups.
Данных задач в диссертации были
To address these tasks, this became the basis of my work, which allowed me to clearly describe how the situation of interaction in the network creates Russian ethnicity. Secondly, is the actor network theory of Bruno Latour, from which I borrowed not only the metaphor of network, but also the idea of users and groups as actors in the virtual space. And finally, these are foreign theories of virtual ethnicity and nationalism, which I had to substitute for the based on peculiarities of Russian virtual ethnicity. The thesis was carried out in qualitative-quantitative methodology, which allowed to conduct complex analysis of phenomena, which is this undeniable fact, the study of ethnicity, both at individual and group levels, by the effect of social desirability to a problem, was designed a comprehensive methodology, combines digital ethnography and non-reactive research strategy. The ideological basis of this methodology is based on the ideological basis of methodology is based on the thesis about the social desirability, necessity of direct perception, which initial hypothesis, the necessity, mutual verification, data by using several approaches of different groups, the need to protect personal data respondents by total anonymization, even though all the information analyzed was in public domain. The key methods of empirical research were used, such as observation in the form of manual polyethylene monitoring, visual text data published in groups, content analysis, which allowed me sociological research. Content analysis of materials obtained from this observation, automated analysis of key discussion topics, as well as the meanings associated with the representation of particular ethnic groups, and sociometric research of links and bridges in the study groups. Based on the declared theoretical methodological blocks, I came to the empirical part of my study, where we used the general population of Russian community contacti to the final sample. Groups included, selected by several first stage includes selection by attributes, Russian by name, size, or at least initial name. The groups had to exceed the size to exceed 50,000 participants. Next, open access. Finally, group was to be highly active, at least two posts per week. At the next stage, orientation selection, orientation, religiosity, secularity, past, future, present. And third stage, selection by level radicality. As after passing all the three stages, the included 10 national Russian groups. Total number of users exceeded 1,051,000, representing moderate and radical direction. 5 clusters based on 2 value orientations that I have identified: past, future, and secularity, religion. First chapter, right? Critical analysis of virtual ethnicity, describe the place of its realization and the methods through which I was going to avoid the effect of social desirability. In the second chapter, my question were: who are the members of the Russian communities? What do they think about themselves? And what separates a friend from an enemy in folk geopolitics? The key points are put forth for defense as follows. First, representation of Russian users about the ethnic group are for each of the Russian groups the tendency to designate as ideal representative of the Russian people, so to minimize contacts with representatives of groups do not support the pursuit of this ideal. The study of collective perceptions of Russian groups showed that all the communities that were institutionalized by factors of current geopolitics in Russia, despite the presence of some basic concepts, their actualization in certain periods of time was connected with extra group factors, political, economic, and socio-cultural. Examples of such factors include changes of ruble exchange rate, holding major sports competitions, military and diplomatic victories, and defeats. Other countries and peoples are present in the space of virtual Russian ethnicity only in the role of significant other. The differences identified to strengthen group boundaries and similarities to glory. To make the Russian groups stronger. Next, it should be mentioned that the concept of 3 key vectors, past and future, religion, radicality, which I have developed, allows me to cover all the main directions of virtual Russian ethnicity, as well as to conduct a comprehensive analysis and comparison of them. Virtual Russian ethnicity is essentially represented, also selecting communities to actualize. This is further the movement of users both between and within communities. For example, despite this set of ethno-national representations can be basic for several communities at once, the level of radicality correlates with the status, age, and gender of participants. For example, after analyzing strategies for inclusion in communities of different orientations, it's found that most often the inclusion in the disclosure of virtual ethnicity begins for many users from a fairly young age. at the age of 30 already considered somewhat shameful, and by the age of 35, people are often migrating towards more approved, towards more general values, such as, I apologize. Can you hear me? Yes? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Thus, the common belief that members are of. At the same time, provision on increasing conformity of female participants in Russian groups was confirmed by statistics. The process, negative and stigmatized stereotypes about the behavior and mentality of Russians, is an example of virtual self-representation, ignoring and promoting positive elements of the Russian character, has served as an important mechanism for creating group boundaries. Notions of significant others in the virtual space of the Russian ethnicity, in most other cases, were more of a counterposition based constant search for geopolitical rivals of Russia and enemies of the Russian people. High level of negative features Russian of. At the same time, it's important that spread of negative others is not a stable. But negative emotions. At the same time, so it's interesting that understanding Russian women. At the same time, I honestly believe that such ignorance in all locus of virtual space of Russian ethnicity. I can't phenomenon of Stalin, despite a pronounced dislike from the users of Russian groups, eventually became the author of a large part statements about the place of Russians in Russia in world geopolitics. Quotes of Joseph Stalin, the religious communities, perhaps the best example of the paradoxical collective representation of the Russian groups. In general, this study opens wise prospects for future research, can serve a basis for panel observation of the evolution of the Russian ethnicity on the internet. Dear Chairman, dear members of the Dissertation Council, this is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Anna Aleksandrovna. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any questions to the applicant on the key points of her research and the results of her research? Who of the members would like to ask a question? Yelena Alexeyevna, welcome. Yelena Alexeyevna, please switch the microphone on. Turn the microphone on. Can you hear me? Yes, now we can hear you. Anna Alexandrovna, in your presentation, archive contents, could you kindly clarify what you mean here? Archive content mean actions of certain programs that collect all the available information from pages of ВКонтакте following certain algorithms. And this chose the algorithm. And so I collected all information related to Russian ethnicity, all the comments, posts, likes, whatever, visual content, video content, which would be deleted in the future. All the information published by the group. Thank you. Thank you, Anna Alexandrovna. Who else would like to ask a question? I'd like to give the floor to Galina Sergeyevna Denisova. Please switch the microphone on. Please remember to switch the microphone on. Can you hear me, dear Anna Alexandrovna? Can you tell me how do you assess Russian the share of Russian groups, the total? You mean number? Is it 1% of total number, 10%? My feeling is 0. Actually, these groups are relatively few, fairly few. 300 or 400 Russian communities, well, 200 of which are very small, really very small. Thank you. Thank you. More questions, please? Do we have more questions? No more questions? I see no more questions. So this is the end. So let us hear the reviews of the members of the Dissertation Council. First, I would like to give the floor to Professor Pochibut, Ludmila Georgievna. Welcome, Ludmila Georgievna. Please remember to switch the microphone on. Please. And your camera. Ludmila Georgievna, and the camera. Please remember the camera. Microphone. I beg your pardon. Microphone. Microphone. Microphone is on. My microphone is on. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear Anna Alexandrovna, I would like to emphasize the relevance of your research. It is dedicated to a very relevant issue, scientific research of modern problems of Russian ethnicity and ethno-national senses, included in the virtual space. So now we talk about the virtual space. So it should be studied. The main purpose of Anna Alexandrovna's thesis was to identify peculiarities of representation of Russian Russians, as well as other countries and nations in the virtual space of social networks. As an object of a study, is social networks built on principle of belonging to the Russian ethnicity. I and Alexandrovna focused on consideration of group representations and of Russian and foreigners. Provisions put up for defense are logical and convincing. The results were tested by Anna in at various conferences, and 3 publication collection of scientific conferences. In our opinion, of particular is a paragraph devoted to perception of Russia, which forms the basis of group solidarity in the virtual space. The core of collective representation, the author thesis, classifies a system of concern about the historical past of countries and peoples. In general, this concludes the historical memory dynamically changing of the modern policy of Russia, collective representations. The merits of the thesis are, first, deep knowledge of foreign sources on the subject. Second, development of own research methodology and a wide review of research methods. Thirdly, analysis of modern collective perceptions, a response to various problems of ethnic and national relations. The disadvantages should include absence of clearly defined conclusions for each chapter and for the thesis in general. The thesis by Aleksandrovna on the ethnic and national group representation in the network space of the Russian ethnicity corresponds to the basic requirements established by the order of the 1st of September 2016, 6821/1, on the order rewarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And the applicant, Fedorova Anna Aleksandrovna, deserves to be awarded the degree of candidate of Sociological Sciences, specialty 220006, Sociology of Culture. Article 11 of the order has not been violated by the thesis. That's all. Thank you for your brief presentation, dear Ludmila Georgievna, because according to our procedure, the applicant shall take all the questions of the council members in the end, or all the questions after all these speeches. That is why let me give the floor to the member of our dissertation council, Rumia Galicheva. Good afternoon, dear members of the dissertation council. I'm glad to be present at today's session. First of all, I'd like to mention relevance of the thesis because indeed, as was mentioned already, very little attention is paid right about national identity. So this is special, and is very relevant. The issue is relevant, highly relevant. Call themselves Russian, and outside Russia there's quite a number of Russian-speaking people. Is a Russian ethnicity, of course, in which a virtual space is very important. And relevance is in the fact that Anna Aleksandrovna, social networks such as Vkontakte, which is very popular with the young people, and also should be mentioned, this is quite complex, the subject is quite complex, because ethnic national identity is quite blurred. Many theses, monographs dedicated to Russian national identity, but didn't get due attention, the ethnicity. And the theoretical significance is in the fact as an understanding of ethnicity, how the effect of social desirability can be overcome. And I would like to specially emphasize that the first serious analysis of conceptual basics for critical analysis and study. And we can say that Anna Aleksandrovna qualitative methodology can be of actors, their culture, 5 clusters of identity, and she was able to analyze over 1 million people, which is very impressive contribution in sociology. So she analyzed social demographical characteristics, the gender, status, and role, and level of radicality in such communities. So in general, the work of Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorovna is she conducted a deep study, in-depth study. Their results can be used in the future research of cultural, the cultural research and sociology. Can be useful for educationalists, social culture studies, and international cooperation. But along with the positive comments, I have some critical remarks as well. So I would like the applicant to pay attention to the following. Network representation at the national groups in the virtual space of Russian ethnicity raises a question. Which ethno-national groups are we talking about here? We're talking about sites representing Russian ethnic identity. Next, as it says in the thesis, the method used for non-reactive strategy of collecting empirical data suggests a high level of anonymity. Nevertheless, the expert evaluation of obtained data is a list of groups with all the necessary references. So it's difficult to fully understand and evaluate the research results. A final result of highlighted analyzed semantic clusters, it seems that Russian ethnicity is almost entirely based on traditionalism. This is evidenced by revealed stereotypes about family, men and women, and which are obvious. First of all, because of ethnic basis of any nation, all the association with return to its roots and fundamental values. According to the study, it turns out that the collective representations of the virtual audience on the study are limited to sports events, military actions abroad, and pension reform. However, as we know, there is a great lack of unifying ideas that connect people based on the Russian ethnicity. So, of course, it's more of an ideological task. Yet, it will be interesting to see some digital traces of Russian ethnicity. So that will be very interesting. And in the section on social and demographic characteristics, does not include differences in the use of Russian by one or other group of actors. Although, of course, the language represents the main ideas, values, norms, and practices of the participants of the Russian ethnic communities. Next, 5. Analysis of geopolitical orientations showed that other countries can be considered as enemies. US, Ukraine, Germany, and allies such as Belarus, Southeast Ukraine, Serbia, and orientation towards Asian countries remained undisclosed. For example, China and the Chinese, judging by press and the internet, occupy a significant role in the Russian media. China and a number of other countries been excluded. And finally, in the conclusions section, page 159, the author says, unstable position of the Russian people in their own state. So here I'd like to ask a question. What other nation has a stable position in Russia or in any other nation, any other country in the world? I think this question is based on the from the book Clarity of Concept of Ethnicity and Nationality. So these are my remarks and questions, but of course they do not diminish all the mentioned remarks and questions do not diminish the good impression of the thesis by Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorova, and the thesis corresponds to the requirements, and the author deserves to be awarded the degree of candidate of sociological sciences, specialty 220006, sociology of culture. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you. Can you hear us? Let me give the floor to Professor of Russian History, the 20, Galina Sergeyevna Denisova, and her review. Thank you, dear Chairman, dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear. I am very grateful. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this discussion. I think this is a very interesting thesis. I sent a detailed review in which I think all the qualification parameters of this thesis, and in my opinion, they correspond to the requirements, object, relevance of the study, goals, tasks, in my opinion, correspond to the applicable requirements of the Dissertation Council of Petersburg University and the Ministry of Education, Supreme Attestation Commission. And I think that all the objectives and tasks, goals and tasks said by Anna Aleksandrovna have been implemented. I also agree with the points of creating new scientific knowledge, but as I think the result of her work is that the applicant introduced theoretical of digital ethnography, which is being developed mostly by foreign scientists now, personally collected by the author. So these results which she has listed herself, obvious from the text, enable us to say about great potential of the thesis. The author sees a comprehensive approach to virtual identity in defining universal basic values and in testing the methods of reactive strategy of virtual communities. I think this statement made by the author, actually, I believe that the main advantage of this thesis by Fedorova and Aleksandrovna is in digital space of Russian ethnicity, the subject of which is not professional actors, but politicians, not politicians, but ordinary citizens. And for good reason of national authors, virtual space. And speaking of recreation of concepts of Russian identity in the virtual space, such works is simply absent. So far, I only found only one such work, the work written by our applicant, and of course, that is why the work has great potential. Study of representation of ethnicity, and generally speaking, general understanding. This also explains my other conclusion. Scientific component of this thesis is in empirical studies, not described in chapter 2, but in developing empirical study. So in the first chapter, reliability of results, good level of theoretical analysis, professional approaches of sociological study, including modern technology of data processing. And in that respect, I would like to emphasize of all the steps of empirical analysis of her objects, impressive use of visual social graphics. The very text of the thesis is very coherent, is very rich. It's hard to squeeze out water. The text is very rich, very informative. I'm focusing on the positive points, yet I also have some critical. I would like to make some critical results. The brilliant work always calls for the desire to develop, to some parameters have been studied and some have not been studied. Of course, for me, I'd like to say I was very impressed by the thesis, and in my opinion, even if the author only addressed half of her tasks, develop her concept of virtual ethnicity and introduce it into scientific circulation, and with the help of this method, even if she limited herself to this task, already that would be that study already that would be a study worth awarding a degree. But she went even further. She decided to apply this to the study of ethnicity, and that is why, in my opinion, all the parts of the work, theoretical and practical, they do not have equal value, equally well represented in a sense how they are positioned empirically. If we look at this second empirical part of the thesis, paragraph 2.2, 2.3, here the author loses or misses the marks you have sent earlier. Look at the empirical indicators, ethnic, but why she identifies and units for analysis. This is not clear. Here I can give you some example. For example, stereotypes in the groups identified by the author. Why only this stereotype? Because it's relevant for Russian 10 communities under consideration. There's no empirical explanation to this. Let me give you another example. The 86, including situation where the content of the post itself contain negative statements about the policy of the Ukrainian authorities. Page 143. Yes, but how was this information obtained? Which criteria has she used? Such examples in chapter 2, I can give quite a number of such examples in chapter 2. And I think this happened because this part selection units, because the methodology is quite well developed. Here, Aleksandrovna is not interested in that. Here, she thinks maybe the empirical units. And the empirical material collected and generalizations not been brought by the author to reflection on the practical application of the results of her research. And in my opinion, this is very important. It's no coincidence that only publications in the academic environment appear in the reference testing of the research results. This situation, in my opinion, reduces the social effect of the research performed. It should draw attention, developing program of upbringing, positioning of Russian culture at educational institutions. So this material has practical application. Unfortunately, the author did not identify the practical ways. That is why these comments that I mentioned, these comments do not reduce a high positive assessment of the thesis and are rather of a recommendatory nature. The thesis by Aleksandrovna Fedorova is undoubtedly an original and innovative piece, corresponds to the requirements. 11 of modern communication and Article 12, global communication systems and spiritual life of the society. And in conclusion, I would like to say that the thesis by Anna Alexandrovna Fedorova on the theme Ethnic and National Group Representation in the Network Space of the Russian Ethnicity corresponds to the basic requirements established on the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1, on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the applicant Fedorova Anna Alexandrovna deserves to be awarded the degree of candidate of sociological sciences, specialty 220002, sociology of culture. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, dear Galina Sergeyevna. Let me give the floor to Елена Alexeyevna Kladnikova, professor of Herzen Pedagogical University. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. You're all familiar with my review, so I shall not read it. Can you hear me well? Colleagues, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear me. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Everything is okay. Okay, let me continue. Dear colleagues, the thesis is devoted to the highly relevant problems as a new sphere of scientific knowledge, and the vision, the understanding of these issues, of which Anna Alexandrovna, especially in our complex epoch. And let me remind you that in my Anna Alexandrovna touched upon a very interesting issue, which was a subject of her study. She gave a logical interpretation. Moreover, what is the size of her sample of respondents as a historian? So this is a highly representative number. Next, as a great merit of the thesis, is the object, the study of virtual communities, which Anna Alexandrovna applied the cyberspace. This method, which she has chosen, is very interesting. It's a very interesting tendency. The interaction in this space where communities exist. And in my opinion, such as the Russian and I think this is a very good instrument, new instrument, the virtual spaces, which are not very approved unit, very important of gender, this community. This novel gave novelty and the social community
это очень интересный, очень
symbolic
здравый
element.
подход. И теперь
I think
попробую
this is
перейти
very
вкратце к
approach.
некоторым недостаткам, которые
So now let's
являются
describe
достоинств
minor
тех разработок,
shortcomings
которые
of work,
провела Анна Александровна в этом новом пространстве
work
актуальных этнических
productive in the
образований.
middle.
Первое, что я хотела бы
First,
отметить в качестве некоторого
I'd like
недостатка, это материалы, которые собраны,
materials
проанализированы
that analyze
автором. Они ставят скорее, не дают, скорее ставят вопрос, чем, собственно, отличаются
what's the
наработки реальной этнографии от тех наблюдений, которые сделала Анна
situations
Александровна, которая собрала вот 1
who
051 000
came 1,051,000
свидетельств респондентов, которые принимали участие в
participants
ее
in study.
исследовании. Ну, я долго тут объясняю, что я
I
хотела сказать. Можно я не буду это все читать?
would
Это достаточно долго и
provide
подробно изложено. Я думаю, вы
what
все
I
познакомились с
read
этим
here.
текстом.
I
И
think
перейду
you
к
have
следующему
already my
недостатку, который является, повторяю, продолжением тех
continuation
достоинств, которые явно
of the
демонстрируют
advantage
работа Анны Александровны. Вот она
shown
упоминает метод
as
работы
work.
с Big Data, о котором
Uh,
писала
methods of work with big data.
вот несколько раз она упоминает этот
We
1
mentioned
051
1
000 респондентов.
million.
Он был, собственно, применен в
So
целях
this
классификации материала
method was just
только как метод
classification of material.
кластерного анализа. Но ведь кластерный анализ очень
Class
широко применяется в социологии при
is
работе с
quite
гораздо меньшими объемами
there's
данных. И,
small
возможно,
amount.
автор использовал и другие методы
Have
работы,
used
которые
other methods of
позволяют
work
выявить очень важные
which
латентные характеристики
by important
случайного объекта.
latent of the
Когда
object
упоминает именно Big
when
Data,
mentions
хорошо было
it
бы увидеть эти
would be
латентные
good
характеристики
these
актуальных сообществ.
hidden characteristics
Позволю расширить здесь
study
свою претензию.
and
Big Data выходит на
big
не
data
просто diff-дату, да, то есть то
is
различие, которое мы можем
the,
иметь благодаря машинной
the
обработке, она его
diff
выявляет, но и дает
in
нам некоторые
percent,
руководства с
but also
работой в
provide
deep
kind of
data. Я
guidance
думаю, что Анна Александровна меня поняла, и
on
в
the
дальнейшем, конечно, этот метод
and
позволит ей
the
сделать еще
future
более
method
интересное открытие.
course
Третья
uh,
особенность,
neighborhood of
которую
third
демонстрирует работа Анны Александровны,
on
это
work
требование объективности в исследовании любого
is
социологического феномена, что
the
предполагает сбор
subjective
материала и
one
дальнейший анализ его с учетом данных
future and
сравнительного анализа. Вот так для большей
compare
объективности результатов,
this
полученных автором на материале
the
изучения
result of the
сообществ, которые действуют в поле именно
ethnic
русской этничности,
of
желательно
Russia
было бы
it
осуществить
would be
сопоставление этого
good
материала с данными, но, может быть,
to
какого-то другого
compare the
сообщества.
with
Ну, не знаю, там
data
взять для
unit
примера
could
мусульман или
be
там ислам, или,
Muslim
я, конечно, не хочу говорить буддистов, но какого-то вот крупного,
would
крупного такого же сообщества,
at
типа,
any
так сказать,
other
этнического образования в виртуальном
opportunity
пространстве. Ну и
in
последнее
work
замечание.
in my
Очень значимо
last
концептуально
from
в плане утверждения Анны
this
Александровны, что согласно данным
that
кластерным
according to
распределением
classic
наибольшее
data
число активных в
largest
настоящий
number
момент сконцентрировано в
of
радикальных
is
религиозных,
radical
радикальных
religion
популярных
and
сообществах,
radical
направленных на создание,
students
распространение
aim to
культурных
create
смыслов
disseminate ethnic cultural
о
meanings
ценности русской
that
истории. В
tell
свою очередь,
of
наибольшое количество
history
пассивных
and the
пользователей
large
оказывается
number of
связано с
passive
фактором
turn to be
будущего. Да?
connected to the future
Именно в ответе на
and
вопрос, почему дела
the
обстоят
answer
так или иначе, хотелось бы
is
вот
why is
все-таки
this
услышать
not otherwise
некую
will be
внятную
to
идею,
hear
которая бы, например,
coherent idea
объяснение получила в
or
заключении. Вот я смотрела внимательно
in
заключение,
conclusion.
там вот как-то ответом
I
на этот
looked at the
поставленный
conclusion,
самим же автором очень яркий, очень актуальный вопрос.
the
Мне пока
very
удалось
relevant
найти. Но,
question,
повторяю, что несмотря на все
but
перечисленные
despite
замечания,
all the
мне
above-mentioned
кажется,
remarks,
что они могут служить
I believe
исключительно как
they
такими предложениями к дальнейшей
can
разработке
be
этой
as
важной
suggestion
темы, которую
for
взялась
future
разрабатывать
research
Анна Александровна.
of
Поэтому вывод, который
undergraduate
мне хотелось бы
research
сделать, звучит так. Диссертация
And the thesis
Александровны на тему сетевой репрезентации социальных групп в
on
актуальном
ethnic
пространстве русской книги
representation network space
соответствует
the
новым
Russian
требованиям,
community corresponds to the basic
установленным
requirements
приказом от
set forth by the order the 1st of
1
September
года номер
16
68-21/1 о порядке
on
присуждения
awarding
учебных степеней в Санкт-Петербургском
President
государственном
University
университете и соискатель
and
Федорова
applicant
Анна
Fedorova
Александровна заслуживает
Anna
присуждения
deserve
ученой степени
awarded the
кандидата
degree of
социологических наук
candidate
по
of
специальности
sociological
22
science at 22
0006, ну и пункт 11 указом о
Article
порядке
7 of
диссертантской
government
вне
law has not
науки.
been
Спасибо
violated.
большое за ваше внимание.
Thank you for your
Спасибо
attention.
большое вам, Елена Алексеевна.
Much,
Теперь
Елена
слово
Alexandrovna.
предоставляется
Now,
Марине
give
Михайловне
the floor
Сибельге,
to Marina Mihailovna
профессору
Professor
Северо-Кавказского федерального
of
университета для
Education
оглашения своего отзыва. Пожалуйста, Марина Михайловна.
with her and her review. Welcome.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear
позвольте
colleagues,
кратко остановиться на
let me
отзыве.
briefly,
Прежде всего, конечно, актуальность. То, что
first of all,
отмечается, и актуальность, на мой взгляд,
has been
связана с такими
think
тремя
relevance
основными
connected with the two
факторами. Первое, то, что
main points. First,
культурная проблематика является вообще одной из наиболее острых для
some
российского общества и современного
most relevant
российского
issues for the
общества.
Russian society,
Во-вторых, то, что
modern
действительно
society, and
цифровизация
secondly,
повседневности приводит к тому, что
digitalization
именно виртуальное
results
пространство
in
становится полем
fact that
репрезентации
enter
этой
virtual
личности, прежде
space,
всего молодежи. И в-третьих,
primarily
то, что вопрос
and the
этничности и
issue
ее
of Russian
репрезентации являются наименее
representation
разработанной
are the least
в
relevant
научном дискурсе и
in
в
the
конфессиональных
scientific discourse.
Концепция
The
исследования
concept
нашла свое
of
отражение в
research
названии и плане
is
диссертации, формулировке
and
объекта
plan
и
of
предмета, цель, задач.
stating
Все это
object,
четко
subject,
логично,
goals,
и все
object,
это
which are
последовательно
consistently
реализуется в диссертации.
implemented.
Выбранные
This is
методология и методика
the
изучения
methodological
заявленной
base
проблемы оптимально соответствует
is
сформулированным
to
параметрам
fit
целей и задачам
the
работы.
tasks, goals set by the all
Исследования, осуществленная
level
интерпретация
of
полученных результатов
practicality,
свидетельствует о
man-
недостаточной методологической
sufficient
грамотности
methodological
к
skills.
наиболее таким
The
важным
main
достижениям
key
диссертанта,
merit
то есть к таким
the
заслугам
author,
диссертанта, я бы отнесла глубокий
I would
анализ
like to mention the deep
теоретико-методологических
analysis,
основ
theoretical
изучения
found
виртуальной этнической
the study of
идентичности
virtual
в
ethnic
современном социогуманитарной науке.
model.
Второе, это действительно
Secondly,
использование
the
нереактивной
use
стратегии
of
сбора и
non-reactive
анализа эмпирических данных,
collective
которая
analysis,
мало используется в социологии
which is
культуры, но обладает очень большим
not
познавательным
wide
потенциалом.
sociology structure,
Третье –
but
это качественный анализ
in fact,
контента
the
социальных сетей, попавших в выборку. И
analysis
тут особо
content
интересно то, что это дается
is
в
example
контексте такого классического понятия,
in
как
the
коллективные
context
представления.
such as
И
collective
интересным представляется также
image
выбор смысловых
and
единиц для
the choice
анализа качественных
to
данных репрезентации,
analysis
так сказать, личности в
of
виртуальном пространстве. Вместе с
the
тем,
Russian in the space
диссертация, на наш взгляд,
same
имеет
time.
ряд недочетов,
In
которые
this
автору необходимо учесть
from
в своей дальнейшей
which
исследовательской
the
и
author should
прикладной
take into consideration in future research.
Прежде всего, на
First,
определенная методологическая слабость
certain
является
methodological weakness
непроработанность понятия,
is the lack of
присутствующего в
elaboration
названии диссертации
of the
сетевые
in its
репрезентации.
title, network
Несмотря на
representation,
популярность
despite
концепции
clarity
репрезентативной
of the
культуры,
concept.
то, что понятие используется широко,
And
используется
in fact, the
в
concepts are
социогуманитарном
quite
знании,
widely used.
тем не менее, понятие репрезентация,
The
социальная репрезентация, тем
social
более
representation,
сетевые репрезентации, как
especially net
категория социологии,
representation,
не
as
разработаны.
part
Это
has
вызывает ряд
not
вопросов
yet been fully developed.
соотношения
This results in a number of,
выделяемых там смысловых единиц
for example,
сетевыми репрезентациями. Ну
that
и вообще представляется, что использование именно
and
понятия
use
репрезентации
of
как
the concept
такого
of network representation
осевого позволило бы более четко
would allow
структурировать весь
to
материал
structure the
диссертации.
entire material
Также с позиции
more
методологии
clearly.
социологического
As from
исследования
point of view
значением
sociological research,
диссертации является отсутствие во
the
введении
omission or
четко
absence of
сформулированной
related research
гипотезы.
hypothesis
Как
in the
известно,
introduction.
гипотеза в социологическом исследовании у нас
There's no
является
hypothesis,
отправной
is
точкой
the starting
интерпретации,
point,
то есть
interpretation,
задает как бы вектор интерпретации.
analysis
И
of
вот это конструирование
and
общей гипотезы
construction
или
of
системы гипотез исследования сделала бы работу
the
более
research would
действительно
make work
логичным.
logic
Автор,
in
на наш
general.
взгляд,
In
автор, на
our
наш
opinion,
взгляд, не
the author
уделяет достаточного внимания
doesn't pay
описанию
attention
методики анализа
to
качественных
description of
данных,
the
и об этом
methodology,
уже
quality of
говорили
data, and
другие эксперты. То есть, в частности, не представлены логические
for
схемы
example,
кодировки качественных
there's no
данных,
logical
которые бы
use of
сняли
coding
вопрос о
that would
выборе вообще
explain
смысловых
the
единиц
how the
анализа сетевых репрезентаций,
unit for analysis
единичных
were
в
selected
социальных сетях.
in
Недостаточно обоснованным
there's not
представляется
enough
выбор эмпирического объекта исследования
empirical
виртуальные
object
сообщества сети ВКонтакте, так как сам автор
communities of
справедливо
active
отмечает,
because
что
the
сеть
author
ВКонтакте
quite right says
является
that
живой площадкой для общения
conducted
российских
is
школьников.
a
Страница 48.
network used mostly by school children.
Соответственно, почему берется
The
в
author says
качестве
himself.
документальной базы
So
именно вот эти вот виртуальные
why
сообщества,
he
которые
uses this
возникают на площадке, где в основном происходит общение
uh,
российских школьников.
platform mostly used by school
И
children.
временные рамки
It,
документальной базы,
the
когда
time
идет работа
framework
документальной базой, теми же бигдатами,
is
всегда как бы определяются вот
dictated,
эти временные рамки.
always
Вот временные
defined
рамки документальной базе в
the
диссертации
time frame
нужны только для
of the
подпункта
thesis
«Российская современность в коллективных представлениях». И
right
последнее
representing
замечание, тоже,
a final
по сути, уже прозвучало,
comment
это то, что
that
любая работа по
the
социологии
aim
конечной целью
of
имеет
any
совершенствование
work
социального управления
is
в обществе,
improving
то есть
social management
предполагает ориентацию на социальную
orientation,
проблему.
social
Актуальность темы,
and
рассматриваемой в
relevance
диссертации,
of the
те
topic
результаты, которые получил
results
автор,
that
безусловно,
obtained by the
дают
author
возможность
definitely
сформулировать выводы
in
и рекомендации,
can
например, по работе с теми
allow
же
him to find
самыми
conclusion recommendation
сетевыми сообществами.
that
Но
could be used
в
working with
диссертации
network community that
практикоориентированные выводы и
practical
рекомендации
oriented
не
conclusions and recommendations
Еще раз хочу подчеркнуть,
not
что
not been
высказанные
given,
замечания не
that
снижают
these
общую
problems that we emphasize do
положительность
not reduce the
рассматриваемой
positive
работы. И
impression
было
of the thesis,
приятно услышать в
and it was a
выступлении
pleasure
соискателя, что это для него только
to
начало
read
научной работы, которая будет
the
продолжаться.
beginning, hopefully the
Поэтому
beginning of the
диссертация какой?
applicants'
Диссертация Федоровой
research, and
Анны
the Aleksandrovna's
соответствует основным требованиям,
corresponds to the
установленным
basic requirements
приказом
established by the order number
68-21
6821 of the 5th of September 2018 on the order of awarding academic degree to Petersburg University.
а сам соискатель
And
Федорова Анна Александровна
Fyodorova
заслуживает
Alexandrovna
присуждения
deserves the
высокого
awarded the degree of
социологических
candidate
наук
in
по
sociological science
специальности
special
22-0006
220006
пункт 11
theological
данного порядка диссертантам
Article 11
разрешен.
order has not been violated by the Thank you for your
Спасибо вам
attention.
большое, Марина Михайловна, за отзыв.
Thank you, Marina
На этом
Mihailovna, for your
чтение
thank you. That speakers
присутствующих членов диссертационного совета
of the
завершается, и в соответствии с регламентом я
present and
оглашаю
according to
краткое
procedure, let's
содержание
read
отзыва члена диссертационного
briefly
совета,
the
академика
record
Национальной
by
академии наук Беларуси Евгения
Barbosa, by
Барбоса.
Время с
Barbosa.
вами. Я вас вижу, слышу. Вот я вам
I can hear you.
Итак, в своем
Well,
отзыве уважаемый
in his draft,
Михайлович отмечает,
Evgeny
что
Mikhailov
проведенное Федоровой
said that
комплексное
the
исследование
study
русской
conducted by Aleksandrovna Fedorova, the Russian Institute, by is spread virtual space is devoted to theoretical historical study of the relevant problem. Moreover, he believes the key component of the thesis is scientifically grounded and based ceramic classification representation of two independent vectors of composition and mutual integration. On the one hand, religious, on the other hand, historical and political direction of the post-value differentiation of actors of the virtual space of the Russian ethnicity. With this limit, the author will enable the author to move to in her goals, nation of the Russian-speaking groups and community networks. The use of construct first theoretical and logical methods, then features of country peoples in Russian virtual ethnicity, and finally, the basic results research are stated. It was the key and Babos observes visual representation, graph table, which enable the author to give it more comprehensive. At the same time, should be there are omissions. First is in the theoretical thesis, speaker with a diverse factual material. The author facts the Russia and as the base of the group, the virtual space, it is no logical conclusion on the growing significance of the multi-sided phenomenon in our society, virtual. The second drawback is in the number of misspelling which interfere with understanding. But the opinion is positive, and Babosov concludes that Aleksandrovna on the theme ethnic national representation space of the corresponds to requirement for the order awarding academic degree at Petersburg University, and the author deserves to be awarded degree of candidate of Sociology Sciences, specialty 220026, Article 11, the signature member of the Council Academician of National Science of Belarus, Babosov Mikhailovich. And, dear colleagues, also it's time for me to conclude to read my review, I will, as my colleagues have positive opinion, thesis, discussion of its relevant timeliness, and I'd like to especially highlight the thesis definitely beginning provisions that define the provisions that brought out in her presentation. First, productive attempt division of virtue. This is towards the future, religion, key virtual Russian ethnicity. So on the basis of which we may conclude that the objective, the task set successfully resolved, and the practical significance is in the results used to analyze staged visit not been covered earlier. Material the study presented 5 publications in the leading peer-reviewed journals and published Ministry of Science could be used in sociology, and communication for provincial practice, representation of ethnic communities, groups, at the same mentioned by my colleague. There are I will focus on. I think author should have formulated a research which would be great. And finally, there are some grammatical errors which but do not affect the positive the thesis which correspond to requirements established in academic reason in Petersburg University. Issued the order 21, 1st of September 2016, and deserved the audit degree of candidate of sociological sociology of and Article 11, above-mentioned procedure, been violated. At that, we refused let her answer all the comments. Please, 15 minutes. Thank you, Petrovich. Members, first of all, let me thank you.
Интерес и внимание к данной работе, за конструктивные замечания, предложения, также за положительную оценку работы. Действительно, это была очень ценная и очень важная возможность посмотреть на свою работу со стороны, определить какие-то ее и по возможности исправить ее в нынешних и будущих своих. Первым поочередности я бы хотела ответить на отзыв уважаемого председателя нашего совета, профессора Владимира
comment
Турецкого.
of
Во-первых, я, естественно,
Professor
хотела бы также выразить
Великий,
глубочайшую благодарность и
would
признательность
like
за
to
неподдельное внимание
for
к работе и за ее высокую оценку.
and
Отвечая на первое замечание
I
Владимира Петровича
rate
о
to my work
месторасположении рубрики степени научной
the
разработанности темы, отмечу, что изменение классического
the
местоположения этой рубрики было связано с попытками
given
ограничить
in
блоки научной
connected
литературы релевантностью
limit
именно
blocks of
исчерпывания
sensitive
диссертационного
by
исследования
relevant
к его объекту, предмету
to
и
already
делу
outlined board.
Также благодарю Владимира Петровича за
Also,
комментарий
I'd
о
like to thank
необходимости
Professor
наличия
Petrovich
научной
for
гипотезы
comment
и отметил,
to have
что отказ
concluded the
изначально от формулирования научной гипотезы
this,
был сознательной попыткой соблюдения
this was the
правил
conscious
работы в рамках
of
цифровой
time
типографии.
rules within the framework of
Все-таки немаловажным
technology.
требованием к исследователю
One
является то,
important
что
requirement
называется на английском
of the
языке наличием
researcher
чистого взгляда,
in
то есть
English
отсутствие
language
каких-либо
called
предубеждений
pure
в рамках
science,
рассмотрения поля непосредственно до входа в него.
acceptance of prejudice.
Затем уже после написания
And
работы стало понятно,
after
что
writing
гипотеза
my
бы
thesis,
работе
I
действительно
came
не
to the
помешала и
understanding
даже бы
that
украсила ее,
would be
но
good and
несколько неуместно, наверное, было бы
yeah,
описывать ее постфактум.
but quite
Третье замечание Владимира Петровича
inappropriate.
относилось
And the
к
third comment by
наличию
Vladimir Petrovich
грамматических и стилистических
grammatic
погрешностей, и в данном случае, уважаемый
mistake
профессор Школа
and
был
here
прав в том, что в
the
работе действительно
Petrovich
содержалось некоторое количество
indeed
ошибок,
a number
продиктованных в основном моей
of those
поспешностью и невнимательностью. И несмотря на попытки их исправления до создания итогового макета,
and despite it,
очевидно, что часть ошибок были пропущены, и я могу только
workers
извиниться, к сожалению, за
released
это.
only
Переходя к отзыву глубоко уважаемой Людмилы
let me
Георгиевны
move
Папихут,
to
хотелось бы
the
поблагодарить ее за
review
замечание относительно четко прописанных выводов.
uh,
Точнее, их
conclusion
отсутствие, несмотря
uh,
на то,
conclusions
что я действительно
that
согласна с данным замечанием и считаю его очень корректным,
agree with
хотела бы частично
concept
объяснить свою мотивацию по их отсутствию.
explain
И
my
мотивация заключалась в
question
следующем.
about
Так как работа все-таки
since my work is
многообразием
based
именно эмпирических фактов
on
о
the
виртуальной русской
right
деятельности,
facts
то
about the
их обобщение в рамках
right
итоговых
they
выводов,
possess within the
возможно,
framework
могло некоторым
conclusion
образом обезличить
could
полученные результаты. Однако
to
соглашусь с тем,
improvise
что в
about
условиях
saying
большего
how to
исследования,
read the compile
теоретизирования и обобщения, скорее всего,
good
стал бы именно украшением
for the
результатов текущего
results of
исследования.
my research.
Переходя к отзыву
Let
глубоко
me
уважаемой
move
члена
to
диссертации
the rest.
Вероники Камилевны
I
Кандалычевой, хотела бы также поблагодарить вас
would
за очень
be
подробные
glad
комментарии и
to
предложения.
thank
Так,
the
например,
comment,
в
but
своем комментарии и вопросе Румия
uh,
Камилевна
your
обращается к заголовку
comment,
работы и к значению
the type
поднятия функциональной
and the
выработки.
mix
На
of
самом деле
uh,
речь здесь идет о том, что
group
в советской научной
in
литературе
Soviet
часто называлось
with
словосочетанием «страны и народы».
word
Здесь
combination
используя данную формулировку, Тишков уже
19
переформулировал как раз
Tishkov
слово
replaced
«этнонациональное».
phrase
Одним из
just
первых
notion
феноменов,
that
который был выявлен при
the
изучении
first
виртуальных сообществ, стал
phenomenon
тот факт, что
study
их участники
communities
часто
was
не
the fact that
делают различий между
often do not make any
представлениями об этнических и
difference
национальных общностях.
of ethnic
Именно
national
это
community.
отсутствие смысловой
And for
дифференциации
the
пыталась перенести в
reason
работу с помощью
used
использования данного термина, возможно, совсем
in this
другого.
maybe that
Также я хотела бы поблагодарить
also
Камилевну за озвучивание в
I
своем втором
had
вопросе
that
действительно важного аспекта исследования, а
was
именно отсутствие необходимых ссылок
the
на изучение
absence
групп.
of
При написании
the
данной работы, в рамках ее написания, пришлось,
right.
к сожалению, делать вывод.
I
Аналогичный
had to
отношению
make
к респондентам, которые, как понимаете, не знали, что
attitude
за ними наблюдают, и затем
who but
и не
not
давали
aware
согласия на проведение данного исследования,
they
или
didn't first
предоставить
didn't
полные
give
данные, включая
would
название
provide
групп.
complete data,
В
including
качестве
group names.
компромисса было
As a
попробовать
compromise,
описать
I
идеологию
thought it was
сообществ,
possible to describe the group's
соответствующие идеи
ideology,
дискуссии, чтобы
composition,
дать уважаемым
more
членам комиссии
as
и,
possible,
собственно, другим читателям
but
возможность ознакомиться с этими
still
сообществами.
not make
Однако
specific,
все-таки ссылки на данные сообщества я дать не могла по некоторым
didn't give
фактам.
links
Данная
to
работа,
a
как
number
и
of
все
work
работы
because
нашего университета, публикуются
many
в открытом доступе
theses
в полнотекстовом
published
формате. И,
in
к
public.
сожалению, я не могла быть уверенной в том, и
Unfortunately, I
какие
was not
выводы из
sure
него может сделать.
who will
Во-вторых,
draw my
дизайн исследования
conclusion.
все-таки пришел к
Secondly,
тому,
the
что
design
эти
of my
результаты
study
можно экстраполировать на
results could
другие
be
сообщества
extrapolated
сходной
to other
направленности, потому
of similar
исследователи,
orientation,
которые желали бы
and
повторить
therefore
данные
I
исследования,
want to
могли бы
repeat,
выбрать в качестве объекта своего
could take the
исследования
object
любые
and
русские
Russian
группы сходного
of
размера и идеологической
similar
направленности.
size and orientation.
В-третьих, в своем замечании Румия Камилевна
And
обратилась
third,
к отсутствию напрашивающегося вывода
uh,
о традиционализме
the
исследовательских
conclusion,
Выводы такого рода действительно, в
but
общем-то, направлены на
traditionally,
исследование
conclusion
событий,
this kind
но
really
принимая бы их на
asking
веру,
for
наверное,
themselves,
было бы
could not
нельзя,
accept them
так как
since internet is essentially becoming a new common communication space, I proceeded to premise that traditional attitudes may survive there. And communities are simple, but I was afraid of excessive generalization. The digital traces, unfortunately, was able to identify clear mechanisms for constructing future Russian communities. Such were very significantly between individual participants. Their generalization structure is seen as insufficiently substantiated. Next comment was on the different. The main note the different use of Russian was attitude to substandard vocabulary. I briefly mentioned these differences description of Russian communities from individual clusters. The sixth comment is a question of BRIC countries in China. Ethnic groups. I only included only countries that were mentioned. They spoke about China, but did it quite rarely. And I'm sure that current situation, they talk about China much more often. And finally, in the last remark, what other nation has stable position in Russia and in the world? I will allow myself to respond with the words quote from a post that gathered 450 likes. Why do Buryats and Tatars have their own republics? Why do Chechens have their own republic? What do Russians have? As Russian users feel insecure in their own country. This is exactly the situation they are in, and that I called unstable. At the same time, should be after adoption of amendments to the constitution, the state forming role of the Russian language and the positions of Russians, both in fact will become more stable. As for the comments of Galina Sergeyevna Denisova, I'd like to thank her. And as for the comments, let me, in her first comment, Galina Sergeyevna, content analysis is not clearly enough. It's not quite clear criteria for content analysis. This is because to the fact that automated parsing system allow using large amounts of search elements. In fact, the algorithm was reduced to the following: filter for qualitative analysis of used words and word combinations. Next, selected part of them carry semantic load, exclusion for irrelevant expressions, and collection of statistics. This words included in the sample. Then, as automatic collection of statistics on identified word combinations, number of individual reference posts, and non-automatic manual. This first frequency was calculated automatically. For example, the most mentioned connotations in relation to certain ethnic groups, the analysis of visual sources, and everything the common clusters was naturally done. And in the second comment, Galina Sergeyevna mentioned the representation ethno-national groups. I thank Galina Sergeyevna travels the patient clusters them to expose all the possible value orientations of Russian communities. And since these representations were similar in most clusters, I simply could not draw conclusions in advance. And finally, only need to indicate practical application. Indeed, should have thought for whom these recommendations, who would use these recommendations, would be useful for on-paper study of such communities in this environment. Comment is Akladnikova. Dear Yelena Alexeyevna, thank you so much for your review and on the consolidation of virtual and real communities. On the basis of my research, the consolidation of such communities, however, seems to me should verify this conclusion, conducting my own real research offline. At the moment, I'm the former of model of correlation between virtual and real ethnicity, and the main hypothesis there is an assumption similarity of mechanism of construction in online and offline ethnicity. The second comment, Elena Alexeyevna mentioned work weekend with big data. Speaking of methods, I mostly meant automated methods of collecting and analyzing content of communities under study. The point is that in order to get conclusions on intergroup communication, we have to copy information from groups. In the end, the loaded information includes several thousand pages. Were sorted according to the selected algorithm. Method of analysis, of data analysis. And in the third comment, there's a number of errors. Indeed, there's a number of errors and typos in my thesis, for which I apologize. As for my lack of attention, and I will try to avoid those in the future. Fourth comment, other Russian entity. So I agree with this observation, and in the future I will try to refer to the comment. And finally, the last comment was about the lack of explanation. Cluster. At the moment, I only have a hypothesis on why this is happening. The idea of the future these communities is extremely generalized, which prevents them from becoming the subject of a reasoned discussion within such communities on the contrary notions of the past are very controversial and therefore highly debatable. And maybe I should have gone beyond the non-active strategy. I have to ask participants directly what exactly attracts them in discussion about the past. Thus, confirm or disprove. To draw this conclusion on the basis of hypothesis seemed wrong to me. And before I answer, I'd like to thank Marina Mikhailovna Shulga for her comments. Her first comment was on network representations. Thank you very much. I agree with the comment, and revealing this content would help structure my work. as a whole, network representations quite literal, how separate ethnic groups from the country are represented in social networks. And following this logic, I let me note that this representation occurs through the collective representations about significant, other which precisely serve as a basis for my research. In a second comment, paid attention to hypothesis, clear-cut hypothesis, would not repeat it, and I have already answered this comment. Third, about not paying attention, description of the method. As I mentioned earlier, initially I had to make a choice between sufficient anonymization of data versus visibility. Sorting large amount of data, loaded all names of countries in the future to obtain some qualitative data and clarified search criteria. And the result we recorded in summary tables where future cluster and semantic blocks was carried out. And tables further. And the fifth systems formulating practical recommendations. So my focus on providing all the such networks. I paid attention to popularity networks such as Facebook and all that have a smaller number of individual users compared to Contact. And the difference in audience is not only for school children. 20 to 30, 30 to 40. And yet we plan to expand the reach of social networks. Analyzing Facebook by future refers to the final concept was, as was mentioned already, should have focused more on practical recommendations for people working on youth policy and public administration. And unfortunately, Academician Bosov is absent. But, I'd like to answer comments read out by Dimitrovic. I fully agree with the transition. I fully agree with Evgeny Mikhailovic's observation, but my critical attitude to my own work does not allow me to develop a coherent theoretical base on the material of this study. As other reviewers correctly noted, full verification requires a comparative component, which I hope to implement in my future study in my future studies. And as for the second comment, about type, and again, I can only apologize for such inattention to detail. And I thank the members of the Dissertation Council for their attention, for their questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna Aleksandrovna. So let's move on to the next point of our procedure. On the questions sent, and we have not received any questions via email. Do members of the council have any questions to the applicant? No questions. In that case, let me once again thank Anna Aleksandrovna for her coherent answers and members of the Dissertation Council. Let us hear the review of the academic supervisor, Zinaida Vasilyevna. In her review, Zinaida Vasilyevna mentions that Anna Aleksandrovna indeed proved to be mature and during the course of during her postgraduate studies, Anna Aleksandrovna proved to be a mature, creatively thinking researcher, capable of defining and formulating the purpose and objectives of her work, deeply analyzing the obtained data, finding and applying adequate research methods. In general, the thesis by Anna Aleksandrovna is an independent original research devoted to actual problems of the modern society, on the impact of numerous communication, including the internet and ethnic processes, is undeniable. Thanks to the emergence of social networks, Russian users around the world have a new opportunity to demonstrate their ethnicity, as well as to form group ideas about themselves. Empirical study of these processes has undoubtedly has clear practical significance of the nationalistic communities, their main problems and objectives. And in my opinion, the insufficient development of problems of Russian virtual ethnicity in social networks is possible to speak with because of the theoretical importance of Anna Aleksandrovna's research. In her work, she summarizes the existing foreign concepts of virtual ethnicity, organically applying them to the Russian communities. At the same time, it's important to note that in her work, there's a combination of numerous methods, including digital ethnography and automated analysis of large data sets. The studies showed a high level of academic independence and theoretical understanding of processes occurring in the virtual space. Among the key and most significant achievements of Anna Aleksandrovna are the following. The author makes a successful attempt to overcome the effect of social desirability of respondents in studying the ethnic perceptions, carried out thanks to discrete research methods. Introduction of the concept of value differentiation of the Russian communities in the virtual space of social networks, and in the identification of vectors of implementation of people's geopolitics, as well as the key ethnic stereotypes of users of the social network of Kontakte. In general, in her thesis, Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorovna demonstrated the ability to work with non-standard empirical field, apply her theoretical baggage, as well as finally interpret the data she obtained. In my opinion, the conducted research can make a significant contribution both to the development of theory and practice of ethno-sociological research in the side of communication in the virtual space. The reliability of the thesis provisions and conclusions is beyond doubt. The thesis by Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorovna numeric representation of the national groups in the virtual space of the Russian ethnicity meets all the requirements of the of all the applicable requirements for the degree of kind of sociological sciences. Specialty 220006, Sociology of Culture. Article 11 of the order has not been violated. Professor of the Department of Cultural Anthropology and Ethnic Sociology of St. Petersburg University, Doctor of Sociological Sciences. This is we finish reading the reviews, and since we're working in the remote mode, maybe someone has questions. Maybe someone has a comment related with our work mode. Because of this unusual work mode, the work. If no one has any questions, now we have the opportunity, before we proceed to the voting, we can take a break to discuss with the sound switched off. What do you think? Do we need a technical break before the final vote? Do we need a private discussion? Or we have asked questions and got coherent answers? No. No. In that case, let us continue our session. Let's proceed to the voting. And according to the existing procedure, let me ask members of the council to say their opinions. Dear Ludmila Georgievna, your opinion on awarding the degree of candidate of sociological sciences to Fedorova Aleksandrovna, please. Ludmila Georgievna, please switch the microphone on. Turn the microphone on. Ludmila Georgievna, turn the microphone on. Please. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I think you didn't ask if the members are satisfied. I am not completely satisfied with the answer to my comment. This comment relates only to the procedure. Conclusions we should always make conclusions when doing research and in real life. And if there are no conclusions, there are no recommendations. That is why the attempt to avoid is yet I have a high opinion of this thesis, but conclusions should be made. So, what is your opinion? Are you for Yes, I am for awarding the degree. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask if you are satisfied with the answers. Okay, I see. Rumia Kamilevna, are you satisfied with the answers to your questions? What is your opinion? Thank you. I am satisfied with the answers. And in general, I support the work, the results obtained by Anna Aleksandrovna. I think it corresponds to the requirements applied to thesis at St. Petersburg University, and Anna Aleksandrovna deserves to be awarded the degree. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next, let me ask Galina Sergeyevna Denisova. Dear Galina Sergeyevna, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I am satisfied in general, and I vote for awarding the degree. Thank you very much, dear Galina. Елена Алексеевна Kladnikova, are you satisfied with the answers and comments to the comments in your review? Yes, I'm fully satisfied. I can see the point. So I'm satisfied with the answers, so I vote for awarding the degree to the applicant. Thank you, Елена Алексеевна. Now I address Marina Mikhailovna. Are you satisfied with the answers? And what is your final decision? I am satisfied with the answers, and I vote for awarding the degree. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied with the answers to my questions, and I also vote for awarding the degree of candidate of sociological sciences, specialty 220006, sociology. So, on the subject, ethnic national group representation in the network space of the Russian ethnicity. Thus, let me announce, according to our discussion and voting, the Dissertation Council comes to the conclusion that the thesis by Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorova on the theme ethnic and national group representation in the network space of the Russian ethnicity corresponds to the requirement and St. Petersburg requirements of St. Petersburg University. Thus, let's consider the decision has been made, and according to our procedure, the floor is given to the applicant for her closing remarks. And for her closing remarks. Anna Aleksandrovna, thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all the members of the Council for finding time for deep analysis, in-depth analysis of my work. I thank you for high assessment of my work and for I would like to thank my academic supervisor for her professional help she provided, even though we disagreed with Nina Vasilevna over certain procedures. Yes. Also, I am very grateful for the help and to everyone who showed interest in my work. The order to be awarded a degree at St. Petersburg University. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Anna Aleksandrovna. Since our session was held in the remote interactive mode, do we have any comments or regarding the procedure of the meeting, except for those already given? No. No additional comments. Thus, I just have to say in conclusion that the defense of the thesis has taken place, and the decision to award a degree to Anna Aleksandrovna Fedorovna is specialty 220006, Sociology of Culture, has been made, on which we congratulate the applicant. Congratulations, Anna Alexandrovna. Congratulations. At that, I declare the session closed. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Please stop the online broadcasting. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, and all the best. Thank you.